Barack Obama has children, Trump has children, and also with other famous politicians, everybody knows their families, and especially their children are often in the public eye. But with Russia's ruler, Vladimir Putin, it's completely different. Hardly anything is known about his partner, not even if he has a wife, and his children live completely under the radar. Only a few people know that Putin is a father at all. So today, we want to take a closer look at Putin's family, and especially his two daughters, because one thing is clear: Putin's children do not lead a normal life. It's quite the opposite. His daughters are kept a secret by the Kremlin. For the everyday life of his offspring, this results in extreme restrictions and blatant rules, which everyone else around the family also has to abide by. What exactly the undercover life of Maria Vladimirovna Vorontsova and Katerina Vladimirovna Tikhanova looks like, we want to show you today. You will be surprised to see what unusual hobbies the daughters pursue and what dark secret a group of investigative journalists found out that shocked the whole of Russia. So stay tuned, it's going to be a bit speculative and quite mysterious here at Wonderlane. Before we start with the secret life of Putin's daughters, we need to take a look at Putin himself and his wife, Lyudmila. In fact, shielding his family from the public is a rather untypical behavior if you think about other presidents such as Obama, who was incredibly fond of presenting his family at public appearances. The actual origin of Putin's extreme urge for secrecy probably lies in his former job as a KGB agent, which he even kept secret from his future fiancée, Lyudmila, whom he first told that he was a criminal police officer. However, the truth came to light at some point in 1985 when Putin was summoned to Germany for a field mission by the Soviet intelligence agency. The couple, who had been married for 2 years, packed their bags and moved from St. Petersburg to Dresden. During this time, Putin's first daughter Maria was born. Since Putin was not yet famous, but a simple agent, Maria spent her first years in a normal environment. She was allowed to play outside in Germany with friends and never had to be hidden from paparazzi or something similar. A few years later, also abroad, Katerina, Putin's second daughter, was born. With his political ascent to the Russian presidency in 2000, however, this relatively free life of his family changed radically. Because the former KGB agent claimed there were alleged security problems, Maria and Katerina's childhood probably took place mainly behind the 6-meter-high walls of Putin's official residence, the Novo Ogoryovo estate. It is true that there was everything on the grounds that would make a child's heart beat faster, such as a riding stable, several pools, or various sports facilities. However, they also lived here cut off from the outside world, mainly with their mother Lyudmila, who'd brought them up extremely strictly in order to make good young women out of them. In addition, their parents attached great importance to a good education, which led Maria, also called Masha, to study biology in St. Petersburg and later medicine in Moscow. According to her father, Katerina also studied and enrolled in Japanese and Oriental studies in St. Petersburg. However, this cannot be proved exactly because studying was not possible for the two women without further ado. The two were only allowed to visit the universities with a false identity. In addition, they were always guarded by undercover security personnel. Excessive student parties or life in the dormitory were of course completely excluded. This also gave rise to speculation that the two had not studied in Russia at all, which would have been an absolute disgrace for their patriotic father. But let's continue with the special travel regulations for Putin's daughters, which were similarly strict as those for their student life. Here, the women also had to adopt a different identity in order to be allowed to travel. Furthermore, they were again only allowed to travel in the company of countless undercover security officers who were expected to maintain absolute silence regarding their exact whereabouts. In absolute contrast, however, is the hobby of the youngest daughter Katerina. The now 35-year-old actively danced rock and roll in her 20s and was even a member of the World Rock and Roll Confederation and took part in public competitions. Although it was quite clear to everyone that the participant was Putin's daughter, attempts were again made to conceal Katerina's identity. An example of this is an interview with Katerina's dance partner. He blurted out that he knew the president's daughter very well and also confirmed by means of a photo that it was definitely Katerina in the picture. A little later, however, he denied his answer seemingly out of nowhere and claimed that he had misunderstood the question. He also retracted that it was Putin's daughter in the picture. Life is similarly absurd if you are married to one of Putin's daughters, for besides the permanent secrecy about the exact whereabouts, Maria's husband, Dutchman Jorrit Fossen, was only allowed to say in an interview when asked about his private life, "I'm married to a Russian and I have children. I'll leave it at that." How many children the couple has also remains top secret. Oh, but speaking of family life, it's actually also known that not only Maria is married, but also her younger sister, Katerina, is said to have walked down the aisle in 2013 and celebrated a real luxury wedding in an exclusive ski resort near St. Petersburg. Interestingly, just 18 months after the wedding, her husband, Kirill, who was previously a normal employee, suddenly became the second largest major shareholder of Russia's largest petrochemical conglomerate, Sibir, making the 40-year-old Russia's youngest billionaire. Even though there are not many photos and videos of Putin's two daughters, there is some interesting information about their lives and work. After her medical studies, Maria specialized in the research of hormone systems and works at the Endocrinological Research Center in Moscow. In addition, she regularly gives lectures on her research topic. And of course, it is important not to mention who her father is. In 2020, she is also said to have co-founded the company Nomeko. This, in turn, is a research clinic that deals with the so-called genome of the Russians. In the process, Maria and her team have collected the genetic material of 100,000 people to examine it for weaknesses in order to then find out whether these can be manipulated therapeutically. According to the US Treasury Department, this multi-billion-dollar program is to be funded by the Kremlin and is under the personal supervision of Putin. Maria's younger sister, Katerina, has also moved into medicine. In 2012, she founded a medical company called Innopractica, whose supervisory board not only includes friends of her father, but also receives billions in state funding for its projects. Among other things, the company was involved in the export of the corona vaccine Sputnik V. The vaccine was the first blatant headline from Katerina. The president's daughter was one of the first to be injected with the Russian vaccine. But as much as the Russian president loves to cover up and keep secrets of his family history, Russian journalists in particular are trying to find out the truths through research. For example, with their investigative work and the analysis of facial recognition software, reporters have actually found out with a probability of 70%, 19-year-old Elizaveta Rozova must also be a daughter of Putin. If that still sounds a bit too vague for you, you might be convinced by the identity of her mother, Svetlana Krivonagich, who is a former housekeeper of Putin and has quite suddenly come into a fortune of about 100 million euros. Elizaveta is even an influencer, or rather she was, before she suddenly disappeared from all the social media platforms and went into hiding without any comment. Besides Elizaveta, there are said to be 5 more illegitimate children of Putin, whose identities are still absolutely unknown, and probably not out of coincidence. If you liked the extremely secretive video about Putin's daughters, then check out our video about a day in the life of Putin himself, who handles his private life a bit differently. But you'd better see for yourself. Otherwise, we'll see you next time here at Wonderlane.